Cool. Yeah, I just sketched out some notes to the questions you sent me, so yeah, we
Yeah,
can
make it easier.
run through them. Yeah. If you have anything else, just feel free
Sure.
to ask.
So yeah, I guess just kind of starting out, just kind of list the kind of things like the kind of jobs you've had, and like maybe just a small description of what that entailed.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, basically coming out of my undergrad, which was in audio recording. I worked coming out there. I worked at Hershey Park. So there's a lot of jobs in amusement parks, also on cruise ships. It's kind of all the same thing. And for that, I was essentially the front of house person for a show in the park. So that included running sound for the show. So a lot of headset mics for people like dancing on stage and stuff like that, along with some tracks that needed to be blended in, as well as just general equipment, maintenance. It's all wireless, so just making sure if anything breaks or something like that I would be able to either fix it or get talk to whoever needed to buy me new stuff. Um, yeah, from there, I moved to Nashville, and actually the production company that I worked with in Hershey Park was in Pennsylvania, was based in Nashville. So I ended up working with them a bit more, doing some touring around the country, and then also eventually working on the General Jackson Showboat as a front of house person, which is basically like a little boat that would go up and down the river near Nashville. And then they serve like a dinner. They'd serve like a dinner to people, and it'd be like a dinner theater kind of production. So I would set up equipment for a band to play kind of on the deck every day, strike that, and then come down and run the actual show. Um, as well as I started working for PSAV, which is now, I believe, Encore. It's a corporate audiovisual company, um, and I worked for them for starting in, I guess it would have been like 2013 until 2020, in a variety of places. So I started working with them at the Opryland Hotel, which is the second largest non-gambling hotel in the country. So I would like A1, A2, stagehand for lots of corporate events, like Microsoft's coming in to do some sort of um, big presentation on something. So hanging truss, setting up all the screens, delay speakers, line arrays. Basically, yeah, for shows like that, you would build the whole system for the event, and then you just take the whole system down. And I also worked as a shift manager there for the night shift. So that included setting up a lot of sort of breakout rooms with projectors and microphones, and as well as just managing a lot of logistics with equipment and things like that. And then, yeah, from there I went back to school, continued to work for PSAV, also worked for both during my master's and PhD for the school, doing events. So, just running microphones for concerts, miking up the jazz band, recording, doing some, recordings for events there. And then, this is maybe longer than you wanted, but yeah, and
That's
then
okay.
Worked for a theater in Irvine when I was out in California to do my PhD, doing again just front of house model, like whatever they needed for whatever given show. Basically, it's all I just like your call time's at 2, and you show up at 2, and they're like, you're going to do this today. So I got to work with, lots of local musicians. There's a lot of jazz people that came through there, as well as Pat Metheny came through there. So I've gotten to work with just a bunch of big name artists, as they're coming through. And then before coming here, I worked at a community college in central Pennsylvania near Philadelphia, which is actually where Biden did his initial um, speech for his campaign, his now defunct campaign. So I was part of the team that sort of handed off things to his team and coordinated and made sure that they had access to all of our equipment and all that stuff. But yeah, I was the only audio person for the cultural center there. So I would go in the day before, set up all the microphones, run monitors, mains, run. Again, it's just this sort of jack of all trades. Just hit go on QLab and run backstage and pull a Drake for the Nutcracker, and then you're doing all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I'm here. So that's a relatively in-depth view of.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, plenty of stuff. I guess this kind of leads into my next question, which is kind of, I guess, what hard skills have you found yourself using the most throughout, your career? Like the most consistent things you would use on a daily basis.
Sure. I mean, especially with live sound, it's not necessarily. I guess it is kind of a skill, but troubleshooting, which is basically just means like a pretty in-depth understanding of like whatever you're using. So that when inevitably something probably goes wrong, you can fix it very quickly and the show can continue or happen at all. But I guess more specific things, just an understanding of like signal flow, being able to plot out, get a input list and being able to plot out like, what channels are going on what microphones you want to use for what, how you're going to run the cables on the stage, mic placement, just sort of understanding general things about, where on a guitar cab does a mic, like I might need to go get the right sound. Being able to learn a lot of different equipment, especially if you're doing some touring and you're like some like smaller touring, you're often using the equipment that's at the venue rather than bringing your own equipment. Or even with some larger things, like you will ask for a certain console, but maybe they, like can't get it, even though it's in your rider, like maybe you don't actually end up getting it. So just, like learning, what is the workflow on a Yamaha board versus an Allen Heath board versus a Digico board. And again, that all kind of just goes back to basics of every console, every board's going to have the same things basically that you will need, and then there'll be specific things about like this is like solo button is a PAFL on an Heath board, and it's this on like these buttons are where and how do I pre-fader things and stuff like that. So I would say that the number one ability that you want in live sound is just sort of learning, like being able to just learn and kind of always go back to basics. I'd also add in there, I guess networking is becoming an even more and more important skill for live sound. So Dante, very basic IP, like subnet mask, like IT sort of understanding. Since more and more consoles are digital and they're running on these like pretty advanced networks. Because that's often where things will go wrong now, is not like in the audio realm, but in the networking realm.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that sort of leads into my next question, which was kind of like the programs and software you find yourself using most. So Dante is definitely one of those that you find yourself using.
Yeah, any sort of most of the high-end consoles these days are going to run on Dante. So if you're running a console with any kind of stage box, or for example at Prax, the whole building is integrated together, so you can record like the output of the console in one theater from from a different room. Like everything is networked. So understanding how to patch all that stuff is really important. But also, if you're setting up systems, things like wireless workbench, if you're working with wireless equipment to make sure all of your gear is on frequencies that aren't being taken up by things that are in the space, or if you have like a complicated wireless setup, just taking into account smart or other software for pinking the room, for doing making sure your system is set up well, and sort of for making sure things are going to sound good just from a like speaker positioning coverage perspective. QLab is a pretty big software, especially in any sort of like theater or any sort of production where there's cued sounds, pre-produced stuff that's not like live bands, or even some live bands have, tracks that they play along with. So that's something that is pretty common, and also you can use a free version that will do most of the things you generally will need to do for a lot of performances with audio. So that's just a good thing to be familiar with in general. As you can always, I mean, as an aside, like even just for pre-show music, like I often just like to have pre-show music on my computer that I'm playing rather than having it on like Chrome streaming, because the internet could go out. It could it could reload the page and start playing in the middle of your show. Like there's lots of things that can go wrong. So just having sort of control there. And then like for corporate gigs, Rogue Amoeba has like loopback and audio hijack. So programs to route. You can also do this with Dante, but programs to route audio internally within your PC. So a presenter's like comes up to you 5 minutes before their thing, and they're like, "Hey, I really want to walk out to Eye of the Tiger," and you don't have that for some reason, and you can like rip it, or and there's no internet, and whatever. Like so just those sorts of things can be helpful. And I guess the last thing would be sort of gear specific software. So if you're setting up a system, or if you're sort of in charge of a space, often you'll have software that can monitor the amplifiers or the like audio system processor to make sure you're not overloading things. So like, and those are often manufacturer specific. So L Acoustics has like LA Network Manager, where if you're like we just did the Hour for the Ears event, and we hooked up like 18 speakers, and the amplifiers need to be told what kind of speaker is being hooked into it, whether it's a subwoofer, whether it's like a 10-inch, a 12, like what kind of speaker. And so just understanding that software can be helpful. But a lot of these things, like, you can learn on the job. The expectation isn't always like, depending on what kind of, what level of a position you're looking to get into, that you know how to do all this. A lot of it, again, kind of goes back to the previous question of someone will go, "Hey, can you do X?" And you kind of go, "Sure." And then you go on the internet and you go, how do I do this? And kind of trust your ability to understand audio and understand that kind of stuff. Or you can build your own software too. Sometimes I've done that using Maximus P, or sometimes you want to, like, someone wants a very particular kind of thing, and it's easier. Sometimes it's easier to make it yourself. So
cool. Yeah, there's some stuff I hadn't heard of before, so it's good. I think you touched on this briefly, but yeah, how's your ability to network influence the kinds of gigs and like maybe the amount you've been able to secure in your career?
Sure. I mean, I think if from the end of story I told, I mean, networking is very important in live sound. A lot of gigs I've gotten is because like the first gig I got at Hershey Park was because that they would do an internship program for students who, my undergrad had an internship, so everyone had to do an internship, and Hershey Park was one of the places people would intern. So I knew somebody who interned there, and so I was able, I applied and I put them as a reference on my sort of application. And then again, from there, like the production company I worked with there, I got more work with, PSAV. I was able to like I said, I worked for them for like 8 years, and I worked for them in Nashville, New York, Florida, California. So they're all over the place. So like getting in with that company enabled me to transfer, which isn't not necessarily networking, but it is like they have a network of locations. And then especially say like working at the Barclay, it's people would come in to work a show from LA, and you just like, you find connections, like, hey, you know how to use QLab? And you're like, yeah. It's like, I got a magician who needs like a video wall thing, and you're like, okay. And and you like kind of try to figure it out. So I think and this probably kind of goes to like your later thing, but just like I'll try to not answer your questions ahead.
Yeah.
But I think but I think that networking is extremely important, and like having a good reputation, and being approachable and hardworking and fit, and that kind of stuff can be really helpful to, these are like small knit communities that people kind of bounce between. It's still very much not a like go on Indeed and apply for like a position somewhere kind of industry.
Okay, yeah, you're doing well with leading into the next question. How have like your soft skills helped you like work with other people and like perform at like professional level?
Sure. I mean, I'll definitely say like on the one hand, some jobs are even like doing sound are very soft skill dominated. So for example, like A2 positions, like doing monitors or any sort of like position where you have high artist or client interaction, the soft skills almost are more important than the hard skills. I mean, obviously, like you don't want to get feedback, and that kind of thing when you're doing monitors, but like making people feel confident in your ability, like making them feel comfortable is very important so that they can give, they can give a good performance. That people, artists are often very kind of anxious and, sort of like ego driven people. So knowing how to deal with difficult people and not take things personally, knowing, like how much to be step on, like knowing, exactly, like how to relate to different people and getting a feel for people can be very important, especially in those roles where you are interacting with people a lot. But there's also the other side of that, which is like interacting with higher ups, so working at a theater and understanding like, oh, the president's going to come to sound check. The president, like the person who pays my boss's paycheck is coming to the sound check. Like, how do I interact with that? Do I talk to that person? Do I not? And then of course, kind of going back to the previous question, just with networking and even just things like managing your own finances, like like it's if you're going to freelance, like how do you get your name out there? How do you approach kind of like finding jobs? So I think that's one of the things I think also Dr. Fick talks about a lot. But the soft skills are unfortunately things that don't really get taught as much in university, but I think are extremely important in like any field. But live sound definitely being one of them.
Yeah, no, him mentioning it a lot kind of that's why I wanted to ask a question, just see like your opinion, or maybe it's all going to be kind of similar, I guess. Like if you're from the industry, you'll probably have a similar answer, but still wanted to see.
Yeah, you're like at the end of the day, I feel like audio is very much still like very much a service industry. Like hopefully you get to do like cool stuff, or if you're the artist, then like you're getting people to, but like being just being able to sort of adapt to the situation and understand like what your role is socially, not only from a technical perspective, but also from like a social interpersonal perspective, can be very helpful with getting more work. Like you could be, like if you're going to be like kind of an asshole, it helps to be really, really good at what you do, but also you can like be pretty good and be like, fun to hang out with, and you're also very likely to get work that way too. So anyway,
all right. Let's see. So I'll maybe cut this question a little short just because it's kind of like a specific so what would like a normal kind of like setup look like? You can pick which job and just kind of talk through
sure,
average experience.
I mean, I think that there's like a general like overflow, or that's the right word, overview. Like there's a general thing that happens like at basically every type of gig, which is like you do the load in, or even before that, right? Like if you're, depending how high up you are, like you talk with the client about like you get their gear, the gear they want, you see what you have, and like you figure all that stuff out. But once that happens, you like load in the gear, right? So that's even like if you're touring, you like put your system in the theater for the day. If you're doing a bigger event, you hang everything that's going to sit there for however long. If you're like building a building, right? You put everything that needs to go there. All the gear you're going to use is where it needs to go, basically. You set up all the gear, and then at most shows you have once you get everything working, you line check everything, you make sure the equipment functions the way you think it's supposed to. The client comes out, the band comes out, they do their sound check, you get all that adjusted, they go away, they eat dinner or whatever, and then usually you just wait around for however long you have until doors open, people come in, you run the show, the band leaves, you pull all the gear out and you go home. And I mean, that's kind of there's going to be different things, like what exactly those individual elements look like are going to be different for every show. But I mean, it is very much a, like show up for work, set up gear, run show, take gear away, go home. And that's almost every show. You put the space back to like being whatever its default is.
Yeah, that answers it perfectly. Just kind of like you said, an overview. It doesn't have to be super specific.
Sure.
Yeah, this next question is a little less serious. But yeah, what's the strangest gig you've ever had to work before? At least in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've had to work like anything that was really strange. I mean, there are things like people like to have weddings at very inconvenient places to do sound. Just being, like having to set up speakers and being like, where's the nearest power outlet? Like, oh, it's there's just a lot of things where you get events and you realize that the person who planned the event did not think, like there's this giant hole of like, you did not contemplate how we're actually going to do this. But I mean, so yeah, some of the there's always one gig I remember where basically it was like a jazz band, so it was like a pretty large jazz band, and their whole thing was they would like go to areas and they would work with local like high schools or other things, and they showed up and they were basically, where's the setup for the other band? And this was like a jazz band with a horn section and everything. And basically what they had failed to communicate was that they were bringing a whole high school jazz band to play a song with them. So we had about like 45 minutes to set up another 20 plus channels of audio, It's mostly stuff like that, I don't know. I've worked, like dance shows are always kind of weird. It's like, you just get these looks into like other people's lives or like how other things function. I've done lots of like, not lots of, but I've done, shows like with like, like dog, like tricks and pet shows and, I don't know, conferences. Like when I worked at Opryland, one of the things I was in charge of was like audio for the convention space. And so you would, be like, you gotta go set up like a stage in this one, and you walk in there, it's like some weird convention for like, who knows, it's just like, you just run into all sorts of people and you get put in like all sorts of weird positions. So yeah, I was like trying to think about that. I'm like, is there anything that really stands out as being like extra weird? But yeah, mostly just a lot of inconvenience.
Alrighty.
When it comes to that, yeah.
No, I mean, if that's the way it is, that's what it is.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess what you said about inconvenience is probably what is maybe the strangest. Having to deal with different situations.
Yeah, mostly it's like I've sort of learned to like not have expectation. It's like I've learned like my end time is this. Like I show up at this place at this time, and then just don't really have expectations about what is going to happen, how long you're going to be there. It's like you get kind of like a name, and that's about it sometimes, and you just kind of have to like deal with the people and the event and whatever it is, no matter how strange they are, because it's your job just to make them louder, basically. So
yeah, rein it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Alrighty, we got I left the two biggest questions for last. Yeah, like what advice would you give to somebody who may want to start a career in live sound?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm probably not going to say anything that's super profound, but I think just getting your foot in the door is really important, and not like leaving yourself open to opportunities that are sort of like tangential and or related to live sound, or like what you really want to be doing. Um, so for example, like, working in um, just like working in like a rental shop, or like, like a backline shop, right? That's going to just bring gear to shows, things like that. Just, like if you're coming out of school or if you're really just starting, just getting in somewhere where you're going to be in contact with people who are working in the industry, is going to be the most important thing you can do. Don't like definitely go for the jobs that, like, apply for jobs that you really want, but leave yourself open to, jobs that, don't exactly seem like what you really want to do, because that will put you in contact with people who share your interests, or people you can collaborate with as an artist. Or, I think especially, people who are going to school for music technology are often, making music, right? And a lot of the people that are technicians are also making music, or they have their home studio, or they work this gig, but they also, like they're going to go on tour in 2 months and they need someone to cover this other gig that they do. And that, that could be you. But yeah, also just go to shows and events, and don't be afraid to like talk to people. Go talk to the front of house, the monitor person, like talk to the venue manager, um, talk to venue staff. Also looking at joining unions. Like I still feel like this is a very in-person connected world, and just like, yeah, being around, figuring out a way to be around the people who are doing the thing you want to be doing is going to be the like the most important thing. And then you can work, like you can still sort of start as a QC tech in a warehouse and get a stagehand tour, go on tour with a thing, and then work your way up to A2. It's, I think one of the things I talked about in my thing I did in forum was that, like, that, if you're an A1, like there's all of these things that you like, if you're doing RF, you might be doing comm, you might be doing, like voiceovers, or all these things. And once you get to a big enough scale, all of these jobs are individual jobs. And so you can become very specialized in like just being good at RF, and or just like being really good at comms, or being really good at a particular thing, and like find work that way. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just being open to opportunity. Yeah, I can keep talking.
Is there anything else you want to add? Like, I mean, those are pretty good bases of what you said. But if there's anything,
yeah, it's
that really stands out.
Unfortunately, it's just unfortunately, and I mean, and sort of fortunately, like, anyone who's going to give advice, like I could give advice about what I've done. If you think I'm successful, like about what I've done to get the kind of gigs I've had, but like that individual advice like doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. And so I think for me, it's very much just like, yeah, just like put your best self forward. Just, show up for the gig. Like, try not to have too many expectations. Try not to complain a lot. Just like be there for it, and don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, we had like a student after the Chromatics concert, like not an MTP student, just came out like interested in audio, and they just like stuck around afterwards and helped tear down. And it's like, I've gotten gigs where I went to a show with one company, and like, they were just like, we're going to set up this audio. And then just being like, do you want some help, like setting up, like, just like, just helping other people because I'm there. And it's like, there's work to be done. Am I just going to go like sit in the corner and watch people do work? And if they're union, then yeah, you definitely do sit in the corner and watch people do work, because that's, that's the whole job. But like, yeah, and then like basically just being like, hey, do you want a job at this? Like, do you want a job here? I've gotten jobs just from doing that. So, yeah, again, it's just like getting in the door and just being willing to like work. That's probably the best advice I can give.
No, it's perfect, really. Yeah, like you said, broad's probably better because individual's not going to be for everyone's situation. So
yeah.
I think I guess this is kind of a similar question, but like kind of what maybe a potential employer might be looking for in applicants, or yeah, in this case, for if you're working another gig, how do you present yourself to be open to other gigs potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that again, it does depend like what um, like part of the industry you're in. But I mean, if you're looking to go into like touring slash, live sound for music, I mean, I think are you willing to learn is important, especially sort of ancillary skills. Like if you want to move to New York and work in like clubs in New York, you're going to need to know how to do lighting. Like a lot of the times the audio tech is the lighting tech, and they're the ones who are doing all the lighting changes for the show in these sort of small venues. So just being willing to, learn and feel kind of feel like you're not very good at these other things, and just get better at them over time, can be very helpful. Um, Also, just yeah, like are you a good hang? A lot of the time is just downtime. Like once everything's set, there is just a lot of sitting around. So I've seen people that were, seemed like they really knew what they were doing. Just like they come in for a gig, and then afterwards, the crew chief would be like, "Yeah, we're not coming. That person's not coming back." Like they were so annoying. And it was like they did lighting, they did their job fine, but it's just like, no, I'd rather just hire someone else. I don't want to deal with that person. So I think that again, these soft skills of just yeah, being friendly and I don't know. I feel like I'm always like I take a while before I kind of like get to know people, so I'm always a bit withdrawn. Um, but some of the places I've liked working at the most were not necessarily because of the work, but just because of the people. And it was just like it was just nice to go to work with these people. It was nice to just show up and like chill, and like the whole thing kind of becomes hanging out at a certain point because you're like, all right, we're gonna set up this thing, and you're just like plugging in cables and you're hanging speakers and you're just chatting with the person like, oh, how'd that, like I heard you went skydiving, whatever. It's like you get to know people, so yeah, I don't know. And then yeah, like be on time, like especially in like corporate settings, or you kind of have to know you have to know your employer and like what they're looking for. Like you should always be tailoring your CV, your like resume, or how you're presenting yourself to an employer. So like, if you want to work at a club, don't go in a suit and tie. If you want to work for like a corporate AV company, you should dress up and like wear something nicer, to the interview. That kind of stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I think, I guess if I've kind of maybe said anything over the course of this interview, it's mostly like hard skills are definitely important. But I think that, like say if I was going to hire someone, like hard skills are teachable, but the soft skills are often the things that like are much more difficult. Like it's difficult to both find like someone who really knows what they're doing and like, and you like really want them to be, like you really want to be around, okay. Like find people who care and are invested in the work, because I think that's kind of like if you find somebody who like doesn't really know what they're doesn't know a lot, but is like really seems like I really want to learn this and like I really want to be doing this. I'm probably 9 times out of 10 gonna like want to hire that person than someone who's coming in being like, I know this and I know this and I know this and I know this, because invariably maybe they get kind of bored with the gig or something, or I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, I think that's 9 questions. Is pretty good.
Sure. Yeah, and if there's anything else, feel free. Sure. I can always just type up. If you have any other questions, I can always type up, or we can jump back on Zoom quick, or whatever.
Cool.
But yeah, thanks for asking. Hopefully,
I gave you some good participating.
Absolutely.
Oh no, it's plenty. Yeah, I didn't want to ask too many questions, but also I wanted to like give information to where my teacher would be like, you needed to ask more. But I think this should be plenty.
Yeah,
like 35 minutes or so.
Yeah, I feel like I covered a lot of stuff. And I mean, like I said, if there's something where you're writing this up and you're like, I kind of want more specific information about X, Y, or Z, or oh, there was a question I forgot, just, yeah, you can shoot it over to me and I'm happy I can even just record like something in Zoom.
Okay.
Or like whatever. So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I'll
Great.
stop the recording in that